Another community question video, and for this one, before I start off, I just want to say that I've been noticing a lot more comments on my channel, and that didn't used to be a thing, but I don't know what's changed. But I really appreciate all of your contributions to the discussions because, hey, that's what makes these types of things work, right? I'm not here to be a dictator. I'm not here to tell you how to live your lives. I'm just here trying to help you navigate through life. And the more you kind of react to me, the more you ask questions, the more you become engaged in the content that I provide to you, the more it is helpful, not just for me, but for you as well. So I just wanted to say I noticed these things and I appreciate them very, very much. And now let's dive into the topic at hand. And I'm gonna read the whole thing first and then I will kind of paraphrase it. But let me see if I can get the text isolated so that I don't reveal the identity, but you have something to read. Okay, I was able to successfully anonymize. Alright, so you can follow along, but basically, I think I'm slowly seeing life in a better way because of you. Lately, I've been super aware, hyper aware of the way I treat others, and you always mention that we don't always know the whole picture. And so I have actually kind of some anecdotes about how I arrived at this kind of understanding. So when I was in high school, I used to kind of run my mouth a lot, right? I went through this like really strange period of like when I meet somebody for the first time, I'd be like super quiet, but then once I got familiar with the group of people, I became kind of the jokester. Kind of that kind of two extremes. But anyway, we had a substitute teacher at math, right? And then after that substitute teacher had taught, and then our regular teacher came back, the regular teacher was like, "So how was the substitute teacher?" And then like I made some kind of like joke about the substitute teacher. I think I said like she looks like Big Bird from the Sesame Street or whatever. Super like juvenile things to say. And then my friends in the classroom were like aghast, right? And I was like, why? And then turns out her daughter was in the class with us, and so I felt like super bad, right? And since that moment, I kind of learned how to watch my mouth, right? And it's kind of, it doesn't seem like it, but this is kind of similar because why was I able to run my mouth so carelessly like that? Because I'm not interested in seeing the full picture. I just want to say whatever I want to at the time to get attention. And that kind of a behavior, and it ultimately ended up making me look like not look like a, behave like a dick, right? And I deeply am remorseful about that action, but the lesson is basically the same thing as this. You really don't know um, anything that deeply and well and comprehensively to be able to like boldly claim things or judge other people. And so I also have the memories aren't that vivid as the previous anecdote, but I definitely have experience of judging someone super quick and then kind of determining that kind of they're not my friend, they're more like enemies, and then later on learning that they were going through a really tough time in their life, and or I get to find out that they have some kind of symptoms that make them act that way, and I remember feeling like, oh well, shit, now I feel horrible, and I had enough of those experiences so that I can catch them before, because we'll come back to this in a little bit because it's gonna be relevant later, but I'm able to self capture because I know how bad it feels to regret in that specific kind of way. I feel deeply remorseful, right? And just a few of those experiences were enough for me to reevaluate my ways. Is this like a good way of living? But anyway, uh, I can't fix or change something I don't understand, and I've always tried to just do just that. And that's like the story of many people's lives, right? Just want to get better at meditation and thinking about my feelings more. In the moments while frustration and anger are building, sometimes I actually just picture you in my head And when I do it, it feels like you're holding my hand, and then I try to think about how you would view the situation. Always positive, logical, and realistic. So, not to brag or anything, but this isn't the first time I heard something like this. I always have people telling me that there's a version of me that lives inside of their head, constantly like telling them, like, the devil on the shoulder and the angel on their shoulder. Like, maybe it's because I'm so prolific with these videos and I always talk to you so candidly. In these videos, I don't really try to put up a show. I don't try to perform for you, right? I just talk like how I usually talk in sessions, and so this tends to be kind of a side effect of that. And you're right, right? Like, always positive. This can seem like toxic positivity, but this works. All being always positive works because there's always a way to view something differently. There's always a way of viewing something differently because perspectives are always dependent on context, right? So, any situation, there's a negative way to look at it and there's a positive way to look at it. And now, this is where things become like less philosophical and more pragmatic. Is it better for your life to be positive or be negative? And this is why the earlier point about sufficiently feeling bad enough is so important. You have to feel, not you have to, but feeling so bad is valuable because it becomes a primary tool that can kind of direct your life. Do I want more of this in my life or do I want less of this in my life? And that is a very important barometer to have inside of your psyche. So I always give you positive things because guess what? That's what tends to help in the long run. Logical is because why? What makes my advice, which is basically all teachings from Buddha, what makes these so logical? Because it comes from understanding things in the correct and in the more kind of a wider and longer lens, right? So, from my perspective, like, if I'm suffering, there's always, number one, a different way to look at things because why? There is no such thing called a thing, is what Buddha says, and number two, everything is impermanent. Therefore, this perspective that I'm having is only like this because I'm fixated on something like this. And these applying Buddha's rules of life and problem solving is all based on logic because Buddha is provided us with like the blueprint of what is like the right thing. And that's why it's so kind of crazy, right? Like Buddhism was 2,600 years ago, but the more we learn about science and the more we discover with the universe, like literally nothing contradicts maybe some aspects of the future Buddhism after Buddha has passed, but the core of Buddha's findings, all of science's discoveries have reinforced Buddha's teachings rather than dispute, which you can't really say about other religions. And realistic because, again, Buddha's always teaching you, right? Like, yeah, of course, it would be nice if things went your way, but reality isn't always gonna get you. So are you gonna stay attached to that? Or are you gonna adapt to the new reality, right? And so, in those moments, it's hard to jump to conclusions because I just think, since I can't read their minds, you're right. You can jump into their bodies. You can change your perspectives. And it's so good, right? Because it's so simple. Trying to change other people fucking sucks. I've been trying to do it for 30-something years. Doesn't work, right? And when it works, you learn to get used to it. And it doesn't feel all that good all the time. And the more people listen to you and the more effective you are at controlling other people, the more disappointed and the more upset you get and when you can't control some people. And then now those people end up bringing you a lot of suffering. That's not the way I want to live, and I'm pretty sure that's not the life that you want to live in the long run as well. So, I can enjoy not hearing myself talk for once because sometimes I just sit there and don't say anything because they don't care and I'm doing it in spite of them, but very begrudgingly. But recently now I can sit and not say anything because I do care. I care about them and myself and I can just think instead of judge. So this is so important because I have a lot of videos about genuine friendships and non-transactional relationship on my YouTube channel, right? And what I always say in those videos is that friends are who you decide are friends. They don't need to do anything in order for them to be close friends to you because that choice is ultimately up to you. You can be quiet in your friend group and that's fine. You don't need to perform for them because you performing and them liking you for that, like, yeah, that can be part of your friendship, but it's not what determines your friendship. You are allowed to have a close friend who doesn't want to talk to you, right? You are allowed to have close friends who you don't necessarily talk to every day and have lots of fun together, right? Because friendships change over time. And so the quality of your friendships can change, how the phenomenon of how you experience friendships can change. But as long as you are considering them, you're in charge of your experience. And that way you make very, very close friends. And I'm very happy that you got the chance to kind of like experience this in your life instead of me telling you, hey, this is what tends to happen, right? So now that was a very long intro to the question at hand, and the question is this: do you prefer to work in the with the system or against it? And even when life is hard, either way, like in the spectrum, do you think there's a middle ground? How can you be happy in a place that you hate and the odds are always stacked against you? How would you live in a horrible place that can't be changed? I feel like I know the answer to this, but I feel like you could dig deeper into it than me. I feel like you would just meditate and accept it or something, but if you weren't like that, and why would you do it? How would you try to view it? So, I work with some people in the prison system, and I'm a deep believer that you can be happy in any circumstance, right? This isn't really like just my personal thing, but it's basically the teaching of Buddha. As long as you're alive, you can be happy. So, that aside, let's put that aside as a kind of a foundation for just a minute, okay? So, life is hard, and there's a place I hate. So, for example, jail can be one of those things, right? But less extreme example. Suppose you're in a household, an Asian household. I have lots of people who comment something along those lines. You live with manipulative parents who are like always hovering over you. They're helicopter parents. That's a place that you don't necessarily like, right? And the odds are always stacked against you because why? Your parents are trying to control your life. Your parents are trying to get you to live their life by proxy. Or if you're in a job that you hate, you are forced to kind of like be here for the paycheck because without the paycheck you can't survive. And so those things and can really make you feel like you're in this situation where the world is rigged against you, right? And to be completely not to be completely depressing, but politics, right? If you live in an area where you are not really politically aligned with, you would definitely feel like you are living in a horrible place that can't be changed, right? Okay, so number one, anything can change, but the difficulty is just the difference, right? So the most difficult thing when it comes to personal change is changing karma. And other religions and other schools of thought say your personality and basically your karma is inherited, perhaps from your past life, perhaps because of the way you are born, the signs, how the stars aligned, or whatever. So it's fixed. Buddha says, nope, you can change it, but it's just that it's excruciatingly difficult, right? It is almost like you are born with the quality, so you kind of have to go through a painstaking process that almost resembles death in order to kick your karma to the curb. So in terms of personal change, purely personal change, the hardest thing to change is your karma. And then outside of that, like social changes, as you can probably imagine, the more the magnitude of the society grows, the more difficult it is for you to influence, because why? It's like cultural thing, right? And there are always cultures have a force, and they have a specific direction that it grows into. For this, you can read a lot more about the German philosopher Hegel. His whole ideas around thesis, antithesis, and synthesis is like basically a very, very good background reading for this, right? So society has a direction that it wants to resolve to, and you are but one individual, so it can feel like it's very difficult to change. Okay, so in the face of this, right, the first thing you have to do is you gotta accept, like you said, I accept that it's a one versus many fight. And at the same time, I have my personal rights and I have my personal freedom and my power, right? So when I believe that something is not right, when I believe that the world is not heading to like a right place, I have the right to express my opinion, right? Freedom of speech. But, okay, I can ask and demand for change when I am suffering. Or I can ask and demand for change. I can let other people know that this can be a problem because of this when I'm not suffering, when I am happy with this situation. Overall, if you are interested in the arc of change, you have to understand that it is a long game. What do people do in these situations typically? They get very upset and they suffer, right? And they ask for change, demand for change, sometimes very radically and violently. And then when things don't feel like they work, they either explode or they stop. They just quit, right? Because why? When you are suffering and you are fighting for change, it really shortens the amount of time you have before burning out. Because again, it tends to be a long fight. So, in terms of demanding change and seeking change, you have to have an insight for overall longevity of requesting change. And moreover, when you want to work with change, right? What's more effective, you think? Asking people to do this, asking people to do that, do this, do that, try to tell people what to do? Or be the living example of why your method and why your approach is preferable compared to how the people are living at this moment? The second turns out to be a way better way. Suppose you're all working in a factory, right? And factory is like hot and like it's sweaty and you can't really do a lot of things in 1 hour, you know, like suppose you're assembling some shit and then you're like, oh my god, like it took an entire hour for me to do like 20. Okay, and then you look at the guy next to you and the guy next to you is like doing 20, but he's like not even sweating. And he's like he has so much energy after work. Then doesn't that intrigue you? Like, what is he doing? Like, how does he do that? And suppose he doubles his output, like 40 an hour, and he's still happy. Then wouldn't you be genuinely curious about like, how are you doing that? Can you teach me something? This happens in like the movie Wolf of Wall Street, right? Leonardo DiCaprio is like just eating, and then the diner dude who played by Jonah Hill is like, so what do you do for a living? Because like there's a sense of like confidence and kind of capitalistic zen about the character Jordan of the Wolf of Wall Street, right? And so that's basically what I think other people construe as charisma, like self-confidence and just the overall way of going about their lives that isn't really based on suffering. And so what will allow you to do that? Not suffering. and being happy. And being happy in my videos, it always means there is no suffering. Instead of this like state where a positive stimulus comes in and you're like, yay, celebrating. That is not what I mean in my videos. So, that's how I work with this question. Okay, and so the last point is also very important. It's a little hard to read, so I will read it for you, and I will move this a little bit. Okay. Sometimes I wish I were a hardcore believer in God. I feel like if I believed someone was watching my every move and deciding whether I ascend to heaven or descend into hell, I would be more determined. Since I am pretty indecisive about faith in Jesus, I do feel like since it's all in my head, it's all in me, like I am God, master of my fate and captain of my soul and all. So I just need to garner belief within myself. But every time I start to think about having confidence in myself, it's like this unimaginable thing. Okay, so this is where faith comes into the picture, right? Faith, extremely important. Why? Because this video is a little bit long because all the topics that are discussed here tie into another. The more you are conscious of your suffering, as in what we initially talked about, right? Like not judging other people so harshly and quickly, because that tends to invite suffering. The more you have these experiences of catching mid-suffering because you've suffered enough times in the past, right? The more you can catch them, this naturally leads to, wait, I'm doing this again, but I don't want to do that, right? Like, okay, I'm holding a knife. I don't want to grab it by the edge. I want to grab it by the handle. You make those adjustments because why? You're conscious that what you're doing is about to harm you, right? Okay, so the more you do this across multiple areas of your life, the more it will demonstrate to you that, hey, you're going to look back in your life after a few years and you're like, whoa, my life like really changed. And now you will have solved a lot of problems in your life through Buddha's way. And then eventually, right, you're gonna come across problems that are really hard to solve. Like, you know that this isn't right, but you will continue to find that like this one particular issue in your life, it always recurs. And at that moment, you're gonna be like, oh, this is what Billy meant by karma. That repeating force of suffering, right? And maybe it's not karma. Maybe it's just the excruciatingly difficult circumstance that you'd never expected, like a sudden death or a really abrupt accident that leaves your trajectory of life completely altered, right? And in those moments, you will find that the usual speed at which you approach problems, the usual force, the usual direction that you apply to problems doesn't cut it anymore. And in those moments, right, doubt will surface. And it's up to you at that point to decide for yourself whether Buddhism for you only works until this point. I guess it works for other people, but not me. Or you have faith in yourself. And you know what? Buddhism in its purest form, it doesn't discern between religions. So, you're right. Jesus, you are the Son of God. You are a child of God. You are a Lamb of God. And there's no way God would not give you a way out. And if you're a Muslim, Allah gives me challenges because Allah wants me to lean into my faith, right? Every religion has some form of that, but because I'm a Buddhist, I talk in terms of inside of me, there is Buddhahood. Buddha is commonly understood as the, Siddhartha Gautama, the person, but Buddha actually means awakened one. And I have one inside of me. And when I believe, I have the power to push forward through whatever problem I have in my life. And at that moment of doubt versus faith, you get to decide the path of your life. And at that moment, self-confidence, this whole thing, will become more clear to you. And guess what? It just comes naturally as a side effect of solving a lot of problems in your life. And so the good news is you're bound to it anyway. So let's just enjoy the journey and smell the flowers while we're on this road. And that's it for this video, but don't forget, you can ask me questions anytime. You can hit me up on Discord, like this viewer. You can email me at billy@julylifecoach.com if you want bit of anonymity on a non-public interface, and you can write a comment here and I can read. And I'm not streaming that much these days because I'm kind of busy, but when I am live, you can catch me live and ask me questions there as well. Alright, thank you so much for joining in this long video, and I hope this helped. See you next time.